in person, and thank you to all online. I'm Vida Searforce. I'm communications for the Osher Center for Integrative Health here at UVM. On behalf of Kara Feldman Hunt, our director, and all of our staff and our team, we are so grateful you're here. This is a Whole Health Connect event, which is a new series we started this year. It's a monthly series, free, open to the community. It's a way to engage the community in what our affiliates across the university and UVM Health are working on, and valued and wonderful members of the Integrative Practitioner Network here in Vermont. We're so lucky to have these folks practicing and improving the health of everyone here. So Kate had so kindly put up on the machine, if you could see it muted during the if you could make sure your microphone is muted during the presentation, that would be great. We are going to make this available via our website, the recording later, and we will be sending out more information. Please join us at our next Whole Health Connect event, which is in April, which is a research spotlight. So it's great fun. We have a number of other events. Please visit our website at osher.uvm.edu/osher for any other upcoming events and activities. I want to let Brendan get started in just a second, but I want to make sure you also have his article, which was just in the Journal of Integrative Medicine. And his work is out we have some snacks available. Lobby. So please get some snacks, make yourself comfortable. Check out Brendan's book. We also have some information there. Thank you for signing in. Thank you for keeping in touch. If you're not on our mailing list, please do so. You can find that on our website. That's it. Brendan Kelly, everybody.
Thank you all. Looks like getting some dings online. People are joining online, which is great. So thank you to Geeta, and thank you to everyone at the Osher Center for hosting this and spreading the word about it. My name is Brendan Kelly. I'm an acupuncturist. I'm actually a doctor of Chinese medicine and an acupuncturist and an herbalist, and my clinic is about 3 blocks away from here. So it's nice to be in my hometown talking about this. And part of my interest in talking about this is the level of suffering. The level of suffering with long COVID is incredible. It's truly, truly incredible. I started treating what is now called long COVID in June of 2020. And at that point, it was a couple of years away from even having it. So I was practicing full-time, more than full-time during COVID, when COVID was really raging. And so I was seeing what was happening, and so from that, I really was motivated to try to talk about long COVID, because not only on a human level, but on a healthcare policy level and a healthcare economics level, what's happening with long COVID is really, truly astronomical. The numbers are staggering. The level of suffering is staggering. And that's not only in Vermont, but nationally. And so we'll get to some of those statistics in a little bit. But I really want to acknowledge that a lot of people with long COVID are really sick. And some people are kind of sick and some people are really sick. But the level of sickness, I think, maybe in our everyday lives, we don't realize it, but certainly from a healthcare policy perspective, I'm working with a lot of people involved in healthcare policy. The article I co-authored that was published last year in the Journal of Integrative Medicine, I wrote it with 2 MDs from Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center, and I continued to work with them. We actually, last year, submitted an NIH grant for me to train acupuncturists to treat long COVID and then compare the efficacy of that data with conventional Western data. And so I've been speaking with practitioners at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, researchers at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, public policy people at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. And my understanding is that long COVID is really a major healthcare issue, and perhaps even the major healthcare issue in the United States now. So the good news about all of that is long COVID is very treatable. All of the symptoms of long COVID are very treatable. And that's not just theoretical, but it's actual. I've been treating people again for almost 6 years with long COVID, and consistently people get better. And a lot of the people I treat, some of them were a little bit sick, and some of them, including the case studies in the case studies, the case series in the article were really, really sick. So part of my motivation with speaking about this is really to let people know that even folks who are having a hard time, even people who quite literally are having dozens of different symptoms associated with long COVID, absolutely can get better. And that's not just theoretical, that's my actual clinical experience. So I wanted to share that to start. There really is hope. And the way that there's hope is that Chinese medicine is an inherently holistic medicine. That for several thousand years, Chinese medicine has understood the body holistically. And as I'll get to in a little bit, there are over 200 signs and symptoms associated with long COVID. 200. You go to the CDC website or the NIH website, it lists them. So what can long COVID affect? Long COVID can affect everything. It can affect almost every organ and every body system. So in order to treat that effectively, we need to have a medical model that understands that understands how all of the organs are interconnected, that how all the body systems are interconnected, to understand specifically how physical, mental, and emotional aspects of our lives are interconnected. And the good news is that Chinese medicine has understood that for several thousand years. So Chinese medicine is very capable of understanding how something like a virus can become something like long COVID, a lingering viral condition, and how that can affect quite literally every system in every body. So while the statistics, the numbers are staggering, it really is possible for people to get better. And when I say better, I'm not saying managing symptoms, right? So I think when people are really sick, sometimes the best we can hope for is, well, we want the symptoms maybe to get a little bit better, or we want them to not get worse. I would say that's a managing perspective. We're trying to manage symptoms. I'm not talking about managing, I'm talking about people healing and really truly getting better. So there's more to medicine than just managing symptoms. Really, I think aspirationally in Chinese, really hoping for people to heal. And the article that I co-authored talks about that specifically. So that's the context I wanted to share to start with. So this is us today, understanding and treating long COVID, successful Chinese medicine strategies. The first part of the title of the talk is intentional, because before we can treat something, we have to understand something, right? We have to understand the nature of it. And Chinese medicine, literally again, for thousands of years has been very, very good at understanding things. So I'm going to be talking mostly, not exclusively, but mostly from the article, again, that was published last year in the Journal of Integrative Medicine, which is a peer review journal. And I co-authored with two collaborators of mine and two MDs from Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. So, and there's copies there and in the back too. And there's also, if people want an electronic version of the article, if you go to my clinic website, the clinic site is jademtwellness.com. Jade Mountain Wellness. If you go to the top of the home page, there's a link there to the article too. So here's the realities of long COVID. It's staggering. Here in our great little brave state of Vermont, 32,000 people are estimated to have long COVID. Staggering. If you want citations for this, it's in my article. I didn't want to put citations up, but these are all citations. So that's about 5% of the population of the state has long COVID. Really extraordinary. Nationally, 18 to 20 million people in the United States have long COVID. That's about 7.5%, approximately 7.5% of the population of the entire country has long COVID. There's much more to economics than money, but looking at the money, lost wages from long COVID estimated $175 to $200 billion a year. That's 1%, more than 1% of the GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. 1% of all the money made in the United States is lost because people can't work from long COVID. And rather than just looking at that in terms of numbers, I look at that in terms of community-wide, countrywide suffering. right? The number of people who can't work is really extraordinary. And the specifics of that, the last statistic up there, estimation 3 to 4 million people in the United States are likely to apply for permanent disability because they can no longer work. 3 to 4 million people. If that happens, that will absolutely overwhelm the system. It will overwhelm the healthcare system in the United States, without exaggeration. I mean, the federal government can't even get into the system of 3 to 4 million applicants. It's not set up to do that, let alone 3 to 4 million people not being able to work. So this is large scale, widespread suffering. This is sickness. This is sickness not only on a Vermont scale, a state scale, but a national scale. And also really important, the last bar is there is no effective conventional Western treatment to date. And there is research going on, but as I see it, it is not likely that there will be effective Western. If we're talking about treating all of the symptoms, if we are picking one symptom, respiratory symptoms, for example, or cardiovascular symptoms or respiratory symptoms, we're talking about specific symptoms, there may be a remedy. But if we're talking about treating over the 200 signs and symptoms associated with long COVID, I don't think there's going to be an effective conventional medicine treatment because Western medicine, conventional medicine is very specialized. And so this is not a specialized condition. This is a global, to use the term medically, this is a global condition. Not only global in terms of the whole planet, but global in terms of everywhere in someone's body. So you need a global, holistic perspective to treat a global condition. So this is part of my motivation in talking about this and teaching that, because the numbers are staggering. So over 200 symptoms. Can't list all of them, but these are the main ones that are listed, and these are the ones that I treat a lot of. So the first one, which I see very prominently, is fatigue. Right. And so that's part of the issue. When people get COVID that becomes long COVID, they get tired and they can't function as well. But the question then is, how do we treat the fatigue? Do we use stimulants to treat the fatigue? In my opinion, no, we don't use stimulants to treat the fatigue. What we use are treatments, acupuncture and herbs, which is what I practice, to get rid of the lingering effects of viral infection. Right. So the idea that someone is tired and then we just give them energy, that's not, in my opinion, that's not very skillful. I don't think that's going to work very well. There's lots of cognitive issues, memory issues, attention issues. Brain fog is very common. Dizziness, shortness of breath, and cough. Two of the case studies I have from the article, we talk about respiratory stuff, heart palpitations. Also the respiratory stuff and the heart palpitations, that could fall under the general Western idea of POTS. POTS issues is often associated with long COVID, anxiety and depression, aches. There can be pain all over the body. Often there's what's called wandering pain. Pain here and then here and then here. And I've had people literally come in with long COVID and other conditions and say, well, that sounds crazy. This sounds crazy, but I have pain in my head and then it goes away. And I have pain in my hip and it goes away. And I have pain in my back and it goes away. That's a particular Chinese medicine diagnosis. And that's the diagnosis called wind, internal wind. So Chinese medicine comes from nature, right? Chinese medicine is a medicine that quite literally developed from a people in China and Asia who lived close to the land, lived close to nature, and developed a medical system based on that. So symptoms that migrate and move around, that's not psycho-emotional, that's wind. So symptoms that move around, we have a way to understand that and treat that. Digestive issues are common. New loss of sense of taste and smell, which is very treatable. Loss of taste and taste of smell is very treatable. And then post-exertion malaise, physical and mental. So these are the most common conditions that I've treated. These are the ones that are listed, but there's another literally 200 symptoms that go along with this. And the good news is that it's treatable. So to effectively treat a global, multi-organ, multi-system condition, we need a holistic view. So long COVID on the macro scale, on the scale of our state, our brave little state of Vermont, and the country, right? That's kind of the bigger scale that I'm talking about. And we need a global perspective within people. We need a global diagnostic and treatment perspective to treat this larger cultural issue. And another way of saying that is a specialized view is not likely to treat a global issue. We need a genuinely holistic view, and Chinese medicine is very effective. So another important question to ask is, with treating things like long COVID, do we standardize or do we customize? And this is not only true with long COVID, it's true for lots of things. But a strong impetus in conventional medicine now, Western medicine now, is to standardize. And I'll tell you my experience working with the folks from Dartmouth-Hitchcock and submitting this NIH grant, which I thought, I was biased, but I thought it was quite good. I thought it was a very good grant. But the comments that we got back from the readers were, well, we're not sure that this is going to be good science because it's not standardized. And we had a really big section at the beginning of the grant saying why these treatments can't be standardized. Because there's over 200 symptoms associated with long COVID. How can you standardize that? How can you have one set of acupuncture points or one set of herbs, for example, if you're trying to treat 200 symptoms? The answer is you can't, right? So this speaks, I think, urgently to the need to have customized, individualized medicine. Because how people develop long COVID and the symptoms that they develop are not the same. There are patterns, there are similarities, and we're going to talk about those similarities. But how people develop those things is unique. So long COVID speaks urgently, in my view, to the need for individualized, customized medicine. And we need to do an axiom, a saying historically in Chinese medicine, is we treat the person first and the diagnosis second. So the person is always the most important thing to understand and treat. So to treat a condition with 200 signs and symptoms, we need to treat the person who's developing those symptoms. And another important point, another important question is, do we treat the branch or the root? So in Chinese medicine, it's a very metaphorical medicine. It's also a very scientific medicine, but it's also a very metaphorical medicine. And so an image in Chinese medicine is there are roots and branches within us, within people. And so the branches are the symptoms, right? But the symptoms come from different places. Symptoms come from the roots. With something like long COVID, it is essential that we treat where the symptoms are coming from. Because if we're just looking at the branches and there are 200 symptoms in those branches, what do? How do we treat 200 symptoms, right? One way to treat the 200 symptoms is not to just worry about the 200 symptoms, but to understand where those symptoms are coming from. And where it's coming from, the cause of those symptoms is what Chinese medicine refers to as the root causes of the root issues. And of course, we can do both. That's not contradictory. We can say, okay, people are having severe symptoms, so I want to address that. But in order to treat something with 200 signs and symptoms, we have to be able to understand, diagnose, and treat the root issues. So how do we begin to do that with long COVID? We begin by understanding the nature of COVID from a Chinese medicine perspective. Because in order to understand long COVID, we have to understand COVID. And I treated lots of people with COVID. And I was treating people with COVID with herbs because, as we can probably remember, that was a very dramatic time, masks and people quarantining and all that. So I was not treating anyone with active COVID in the clinic, but I was getting plenty of people herbs for active COVID. And so can COVID be treated with Chinese medicine? The definitive answer is yes. Now, in saying that, I was not treating COVID per se. I was treating a Chinese medicine understanding of the nature of COVID, right? So when I'm talking about treating long COVID, I'm not saying I've done Western research on studies, double-blind placebo studies on herbs to treat long COVID or acupuncture to treat long COVID. What I am saying is if we understand the nature of something, then we have an ability in Chinese medicine to treat it, right? So we're not just saying we have COVID, we have long COVID. We want to understand what it's like. And particularly, we want to understand its temperature. So another very important point is that Chinese medicine is a diversity of perspectives, right? Chinese medicine quite literally is 5,000 years old. And so over those 5,000 years, there are different traditions. It's not ubiquitous. Now we say Chinese medicine singular, but really it's Chinese medicine plural. There are many different traditions, many different perspectives in Chinese medicine. So one tradition, in my opinion, in my clinical experience, is not going to treat every condition. So we need to match the tradition in Chinese medicine, because there's lots of them, with the diagnosis and the condition. So the good part about the diversity of traditions in Chinese medicine is because there are many, there are quite literally dozens of major traditions, dozens of different treatment and diagnostic perspectives, well established, quite literally for hundreds, or in many cases, thousands of years, lots written about it, lots of case studies, lots of teaching about it. Because there are so many traditions, Chinese medicine can treat so many conditions, right? It's a very, very diverse view. So to understand long COVID, we need to understand COVID, because long COVID comes from COVID. So looking at COVID to start with, COVID often starts with chills, and then it shifts to alternating chills and fever. That is, but from a Chinese medical view, that is vital information. Because once we understand that, we understand the nature of the condition. And the nature of COVID is cold. How do we know that? Because it starts with chills. When someone gets COVID, now I'm treating people with COVID now. COVID is still happening. It's not as severe. It's not as scary. But it continues. So one of the first signs and symptoms of COVID is people feel chilled. So the understanding of Chinese medicine, that's cold coming in from the outside into the body, which is why, from a Chinese medical view, COVID is more active in the colder months, because we're more prone towards cold in the fall and the winter. So the first stage of cold with COVID is the cold comes in, we feel chilled. The second stage is chills and fever, alternating chills and fever. That also, again, indicates cold. That's because when the cold comes into the body creates warmth to try to sweat the cold out. And actually, the chills is the first stage of cold, and alternating chills and fever is the second stage of cold. So once we understand that, we know which tradition to go to, which is of vital importance, because different traditions treat different things. So cold transforming into heat. The cold that chills transforms into chills and fever, and that's cold transforming into heat. So we have a tradition. It's the school of cold. Lucky us. We have a whole tradition that treats cold. And the text of cold, it's called the Shanghanlun, the School of Cold, was published 1,800 years ago. That's a long time ago. So the good part about that is that this is not a new thing. Treating cold is not a new thing. Treating pandemics and epidemics is also not a new thing. So to me, as a practitioner of Chinese medicine, it's very reassuring that we can go back to these texts, this one in particular, which again was published 1,800 years ago, and they're talking about this. They're talking about how cold transforms into heat, which can then transform into phlegm and mucus in the lungs and cause problems. So while the COVID variant from SARS, that variant is new, the nature of it is not. The nature of it is well discussed and established in Chinese medicine. So the first tradition we go to in treating COVID, and therefore long COVID, is the School of Cold. So the Shanghanlun is over 1,800 years old. Cold conditions in Chinese medicine are often associated with viruses. Hot conditions are often associated with bacteria. So a bacteria infection and a viral infection are not the same, they're different. So the term we would use with COVID, I'll break this down, external wind, cold, pernicious influence. So what does that mean? We'll break it down word by word. External, something coming in from the outside, coming from outside of us. And what's coming in from outside of us is cold. But what's bringing the cold into us is what's called wind. So metaphorically, wind blows things into us. So external wind cold is a viral infection. And pernicious influence means it's not good for us. So it's a wind cold that's outside of us that's causing problems. So this is how I understand COVID, and this is how I understand how COVID becomes long COVID. And this is why I was very confident from the beginning that COVID was very, very treatable. And it is treatable from a Chinese medical view, right? So I'm not saying I'm treating COVID, I'm saying I'm treating an external cold pernicious influence. So once we do that, then there's lots of information on how to treat it. So COVID and long COVID can be understood in terms of Chinese medicine. So I'm emphasizing that because when we have diagnoses, even scary diagnoses like COVID or long COVID, if we translate it into a Chinese medical language, then it's clear how to treat it, right? And I believe that to be true, and that has turned out to be true. So part of what we also need to understand is that COVID, cold, transforms into heat. That again is vitally important, and that goes back to this tradition again, the school of cold, the Shen Han Lun, which says cold transforms to heat in the body. Once we understand that, then we can understand why we were so susceptible to COVID and as a result to long COVID. Another way of saying that is COVID, this is Western view, conventional medicine view, COVID creates inflammation in the body. Or we can say COVID creates stem cell activation in the body. Same basic idea. So once we understand that COVID, cold, becomes heat, now that is of vital importance because we are a really hot people. We are uniquely hot people. We are a uniquely overstimulated people. So what made us susceptible to COVID and long COVID was our pre-existing internal inflammation. And we translate the term inflammation in Chinese medicine into heat. And so that is really important because what I have seen consistently with the people that I've treated with long COVID, again, going back almost 6 years, is that we have inflammation. So another way of saying that is if we weren't so hot and overstimulated, inflamed internally, we would not have been so susceptible to COVID and long COVID, right? So how hot are we? Really hot, really, really hot. We're hot internally. So the Chinese medicine diagnosis of heat, that corresponds to the Western idea of inflammation. So physically, heat is inflammation. Mentally and emotionally, heat is overstimulation. So we are an inflamed, overstimulated people. That is why we are susceptible to COVID and long COVID. That's why the cold from COVID created so many problems, because there was pre-existing internal inflammation, pretty much in all of us, even in our great, more relaxed state of Vermont, right? We're still way, way, way too hot. So we're hot. Our society and culture is hot. To understand how hot we are as a culture, just look at anything, right? Look at our political discourse. Look at how we communicate. Look at how we relate to each other. It's hot, it's overstimulated, it's angry, right? So heat emotionally creates big emotions, right? Any emotion that's big, kind of outside of the context of the situation, implies heat. So we are hot individually, we are hot culturally, and we're so hot that we're warming the entire planet. That's how hot we are. Our heat, our imbalance, our pathology has gone global. And that's not only humanity in general, that's here in the United States. We're here in the US, we're about 5% of the global population, and we create more than 20% of the greenhouse gases that are warming the planet, right? That speaks to how hot we are. because those greenhouse gases don't just randomly get created. They get created by how we live and what we consume and how we move ourselves around, right? So we're hot. Our culture, US culture is hot, and the planet is hot. And some examples of this, if you want more information about it, I wrote a book on climate change that's in the back. You're welcome to take copies. This is a very condensed version of that. So some stunning examples. A few years ago in India, it was 143 degrees. That is not livable, right? If you go into a sauna that's 143 degrees, you could pass out. But it was recorded in a livable part of India where people lived. It was 143 degrees. Extraordinary. Well, we don't have to look to India. We can look to Vermont. Remember the floods we had in Vermont? To the day, 2022 and 2023, we had massive floods to the day. And the climate change book I wrote, I talked about tropical storm Irene that came through Vermont. We're seeing it. These floods, if the floods in 2020 and 2023 were described, depending on your view, as a 500-year flood or a 1,000-year flood. That means they're supposed to come every 500 to 1,000 years. They came to the day a year. So we're having 500 or 1,000-year floods yearly. So we're experiencing this in Vermont, the floods in Appalachia and in Florida, 2022, 2023, 2024. I'm affiliated and teach and study at an acupuncture school in Asheville, North Carolina. I received my doctorate from them last year. And we were going to go down to study, but that was in November of 2024, where really the city of Asheville was just under 3 to 5 feet of water, right? So this is happening globally, and it's certainly happening in the US, and we in Vermont are not spared from that, right? We've really been experiencing it. And then with the heat and the flooding, there's also droughts and fire. California is having the Pacific Northwest in general is having catastrophic fires. There was a fire in 2020, where 1 million acres burned in California in one fire. They had to create a new term for it. They called it a mega fire. 1 million acres, one fire, right? So this is the world that we're living in. So it's hot. It's really, really hot. And not only is the heat in the environment a reflection of how we're living, but the environment affects us. In the holistic view of Chinese medicine, we are nature and nature is us. It's not just we're connected to nature. Chinese medicine is taking it beyond that. Chinese medicine has said historically, we are nature and nature is us. So not only is our internal overstimulation, our internal inflammation reflected in nature, but the fact that nature is hot is warming us up. So it's a feedback. Right? And the feedback is unfortunately going in a particular direction, which is a hot direction. So ecologically, heat creates more intense and destructive weather. Heat is what makes us susceptible to epidemics and pandemics. We're going to get to this in a couple of slides. This is also really important because the good news about epidemics and pandemics is there is a Chinese medical tradition that specializes in epidemics and pandemics. And that tradition was really distilled in about the 1300s in China. That's when the bubonic plague was raging through Europe, and that plague probably made it to China, and 2 to 3 million people in China died. And so the epidemic tradition came from that. It was a result of that. And so guess what the epidemic and pandemic tradition in Chinese medicine emphasizes treating? Heat. It says you have to treat heat, right? So that is vitally important. Not surprisingly, that tradition is called the School of Heat. So sickness in a hot world, COVID as an epidemic and a pandemic. Epidemics and pandemics are not just an isolated individual health issue. Some of the brilliance of these writings from the School of Heat, they're the School of Heat called the Wenbing or the Wenbing Shui, often just called the Wenbing. The writers from the 13 and 1500s, who then wrote more in the 1700s when it really became more distilled and more formalized, their commentary was that epidemics and pandemics happen when large groups of people are out of balance. So pandemics, epidemics happen when we collectively are out of balance. And so how are we out of balance? We're out of balance through heat and inflammation. So that is what's making us susceptible. And to go back to the other school, right? The school of cold, what happens with cold? The cold transforms into heat, into inflammation. And so once things get hot and we get to a level of epidemics and pandemics, then we have this tradition. So that's part of the good news. Part of the good news is that we can understand the nature of COVID, which is cold. So we have the school of cold to rely on. We can understand the nature of pandemics and epidemics based on the school of heat. So once we have a way to understand it, then we can treat it. So the school of heat says that epidemics or pandemics, widespread, fast moving, comes from heat, right? When things move quickly, cold moves more slowly. Cold in Chinese medicine in terms of yin-yang understanding, yin is more cold and yang is more hot. So yang, things that move quickly are heat. So but epidemics happen due to large scale macro imbalance. So what is long COVID trying to tell us? That we are out of balance. And what was COVID trying to tell us? The same thing, right? So epidemics, pandemics are not just an individual issue. They're a collective issue. So, and I talk about this in some detail in the article. In my view, what we need to do to effectively treat COVID and resulting long COVID is to blend these traditions. We need to say, okay, the nature of COVID is cold. How do we know that? Because it starts with chills. So we understand the nature of where COVID and long COVID is coming from. But then we need to look to the epidemics tradition, which is, again, the school of heat, the Wenbing. And when we blend that together, we can have a clear understanding of what's happening. And why do we need to do that? Because different traditions treat different conditions. Not every condition is treated by every tradition. So we need to blend that thinking together. So one way of thinking about this, we need to treat the cold of COVID, because it's a viral infection, viruses are usually cold, in a hot world. So externally, COVID was cold, but internally within us, we are radically hot and radically overstimulated. So blending these traditions is what is really effective. So another important view, I talk about this in the article too, is there's another tradition that's vitally important in treating something like long COVID, and that's the neurology tradition. And that's called the Wai-Ke. And the relevance of this is because Western medicine is writing about this now, but I really saw this from the beginning, is that the inflammation from long COVID can create a wide range of neurological conditions. Tremors, seizures, twitches. So any neurological overstimulation is, the Chinese medical term is wind, internal wind. So we talk about external wind, right? The wind blows the cold of a viral infection into the body. That external wind can become internal. And when there's internal wind, that means the brain gets overstimulated. Again, tremors, twitches, migraine, seizures. All of those are completely treatable. And before I was treating lots of people with long COVID, I was treating lots of people with Lyme disease. And I treated hundreds of people with Lyme disease. So these ideas are completely relevant with Lyme disease. The difference is that Lyme just starts with heat, because Lyme starts with a bacterial infection from a tick. So we don't have to worry about the school of cold. We can just go to the school of heat. But all the rest of this stuff is relevant. So when I started treating people about 6 years ago with long COVID, I said, this looks a lot like Lyme. All of these symptoms and inflammation and neurological stuff. And it is very common. It's very similar to Lyme. So the good news about these neurological conditions is they're treatable, because if we can translate these symptoms into a diagnosis, we know which tradition to look to. And the neurological tradition of Chinese medicine is really fantastic at treating this. So the connection with wind and heat is they're both forms of overstimulation. Wind is neurological overstimulation. Heat is whole body overstimulation. So they contribute to each other. They feed each other. And so the neurological tradition, the Waita, can treat wind. And wind is responsible for most, if not all, neurological symptoms, whether it's from long COVID or Lyme or otherwise. Okay. So before we get into this, I know that's a lot of information. Any questions so far? Or is there any questions online so far?
There are.
Okay. I thought there might be.
No worries. We've got 2 questions online from folks here. One is, are you treating people with what we diagnose here as ME/CFS, which is what a number of PLWLZ progress to?
I don't know what that means. If they wanted to translate that, I'd be happy to comment on that.
Sure.
I don't know what those.
I also don't know.
What's that?
Chronic fatigue syndrome.
Oh, chronic fatigue syndrome? Oh, yeah, I treat lots of people with chronic fatigue syndrome. Yeah, and also that's an example where the way to treat chronic fatigue, in my opinion, is not just to give more energy, it's to clear out what's causing the problems. Yeah, so my perspective is to clear things out. So is chronic fatigue treatable? Definitely treatable. Do you know what the other abbreviation stood for?
It's like CFS is chronic fatigue syndrome, and ME is like, I forget.
Okay. Okay, well, if they wanted to share what ME is.
Great. And next question online is curious about how traditional Chinese medicine can treat POTS and CAS and dysautonomia triggered by COVID.
Okay, I know what 2 of the 3 of those things.
Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome.
Right, POTS, right. So I treated a lot with POTS before. I was treating people with POTS on COVID. So POTS is, from a Chinese medical view, is inflammation in the chest. And the 2 organs associated with the chest are the heart and the lungs. And the reason that the chest can have heat is because heat by its nature rises up, right? Like the warmest part of this room is up there. Heat rises up. So the heat will rise up into the upper part of the body, which is either the chest or the head. And so when you have inflammation, heat in the chest, you just need to clear the heat out of the chest, which the organs associated with the chest are the heart and the lungs. So POTS is very treatable. The autonomia stuff, so immunity, this is really important in my opinion. The way I treat immune issues when people have autoimmune issues is very rarely is it about strengthening the immune system. Right? My approach is with autoimmune stuff and with most stuff is get rid of the things that are causing the problem. So one major reason that people have immune issues, autoimmune issues, is not because the immune system is tired. It's because the immune system is overstimulated. And there's lots of different parts of the immune system, but the most obvious part is what in Western medicine we would call surface immunity, which is the kind of the outside of immunity. And that immunity is associated in Chinese medicine with the lungs, right? So if the heat rises up to the chest, it affects the lungs and that affects immunity. So the way to treat most autoimmune issues, the first thing to do is to get rid of that heat, to get rid of the overstimulation. And then once the heat is out, then it's possible to bring in energy over this and calls qi. But if you bring in the energy, the qi too early, it doesn't work very well because people are overstimulated. So my perspective is to get rid of stuff before we bring stuff in. Yeah.
Could I make a comment?
Of course.
So a few years ago, I had long COVID and was fortunate enough to be treated by the Mayo Clinic. And I'm also a scientist, so that helped. I can't imagine going through it and not being a scientist. But anyway, what was really interesting about the Mayo Clinic's approach to long COVID is they really see it as a completely separate disease. They prefer the term post-COVID to long COVID. And they also made a link with Lyme disease and various other diseases. It's not so much the Lyme disease, it's what happens after, which is a completely different ailment they would like to call post-Lyme disease, which in their eyes is very, very similar to what they call post-COVID.
I
just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, yes, I agree. And I think the clear link from my view is inflammation. Lyme and COVID create inflammation. And I was confident I could treat long COVID because I treated a couple hundred people with Lyme and it's really similar. Yeah. Any other questions? Big or small questions? Yeah.
I'm curious, does, when you're treating someone, are you thinking about their diagnosis, like in Western medicine, or are you're saying this, it's very similar, so are you even differentiating when you're treating?
In terms of Lyme or?
Yeah,
Yes, I would say yes, I am differentiating. And part of the reason I'm differentiating is because my experience says that long COVID and Lyme are similar, but they do create different things. Like people with long COVID were, in my experience still are, more likely to create phlegm in the lungs. And I think that's because it's an infection that comes into the body, so the lungs are more affected. While we're seeing neurological symptoms with long COVID, from the beginning, I've been treating Lyme for a while, I don't know, 12 years, seeing a lot of people for 12 years. I was immediately seeing the wind neurological symptoms. So the way I'm thinking about it is, okay, I have experience treating these conditions, but they could lead to these things. And so I think that is relevant. And when people come with the Western diagnosis, I think that that's relevant. But for me, I need to translate that Western diagnosis into Chinese diagnosis, because that's my training.
Yep.
That's my experience. So generally similar, but there are differences in the way that long COVID and Lyme show up. But it's the same basic idea.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
So my long COVID, which I am currently having, was not in your list of 200. It only affects 3.5% of people. And that is, I've lost my hearing. And I've been to everybody who knows anything about hearing. I'm a little better today on my left side. And I got a pair of hearing aids, which I'm not using today. But, and the funny thing is, I don't know if it's Chinese humor, but I can't work if I can't hear. Okay, my whole world is about listening to people hour after hour. So I haven't had any experience with gestation tubes that are inflamed, lots of draining from the ears. I've never had any problem with ears in my life. So.
Yeah, well, I can, I have treated people who have been hearing has been affected. I don't think I've treated anyone who completely lost their hearing, though. I've treated a number of people who had lost their taste and smell completely. That came back. Yeah, so here's how I would, couple of things. All of the external organs in Chinese medicine are associated with internal organs, right? So the ear in Chinese medicine is associated with the kidney. So if there are ear issues, we say, okay, the way to treat the ear, because branches and roots again, the branch is the ear, the root is where it's coming from. So the kidney is associated with the ear. So from a Chinese medical view, I would be looking at what's happening with not just the organ of the kidney. When we say kidney in Chinese medicine, we're talking about the organ, but we're more importantly talking about the energy, the qi. So having ear problems does not imply that there's anything physically wrong with the organ of the kidney. Okay, so just to clarify. So I would be thinking what's going on with the kidney, but the other part with stuff in the upper part of the body with long COVID was when you say inflammation, that's heat, right? So the heat is rising up into the upper part of the body. And then the drainage is dampness. And dampness in phlegm, mucus, that is associated with heat because the heat is overstimulation. And the body will create the phlegm, will bring the fluids to the area to try to subdue it and keep it localized. So the heat, the dampness, the phlegm, the discharge is coming from the heat. So then we'd likely treat the heat and the damp in general, and then we would look to the condition of the kidney.
So dipping in the icy water.
You want my honest opinion?
Yeah.
Oh, no, okay. No, because we don't want to go from one extreme to another extreme, right? Heat is not created by icy cold. Heat is created by cool, right? So, and also, I'll just be forthright, if you have internal heat and then you submerge your body in cold, often what that does is it brings the heat deeper into the body. It doesn't expel it. Yeah, it's like putting ice on a fire. You know, it's like you're internally what you can be doing is you're driving it deeper. You're not necessarily extinguishing the fire. But Chinese medicine, in my interpretation of Chinese medicine, we're not that into cold anyway, so it's not unique to that.
My mind went to the same place that yours did, though.
Yeah.
Like I should go take the cold deck.
No, we should sleep and rest more. That's what. So we want health in Chinese medicine is balance, right? So if we're all the way over here, the balance is not to go all the way over here. The balance is to bring it back to. Yeah.
Sure. We've got two more questions and then wish to continue. Ensure we get through the presentation. Do you recommend practicing Tai Chi with long COVID? And do most acupuncturists and herbalists treat the same inflammation points?
Okay. First, with Tai Chi, maybe not. You know, and I practice Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation. I have taught Tai Chi and Qigong. I very much believe in the power of Tai Chi and Qigong. But if you have something like long COVID, not necessarily. And the reason for that is what Tai Chi and Qigong, these yoga also, from an Ayurvedic view, what those practices do is they open things up. They open up the Qi. And when you have something like long COVID or COVID, you don't necessarily want to open up the Qi because that can allow things to go deeper into the body. So my thought is not necessarily. And it certainly if people have significant long COVID issues or Lyme issues or other issues, then the answer to me is probably no. But if people are mostly recovered, then I would say yes. And then do most acupuncturists treat with the same? I don't think most acupuncturists do anything the same. Because there's so many different views. So my general answer would be no. If you want to understand the points I use, you can go to the article that I wrote that lists the points and the herbs that I use. So no, it's Chinese medicine's plural. There's real big diversity in Chinese medicine. So there's ideas in Chinese medicine that are similar, but the way that it's treated is not necessarily the same. Okay, any other questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
How do you feel about like mind-body medicine, neuroplasticity, and like nervous system regulation techniques for long COVID? Meditations, breathing exercises, stuff like that.
I'm very much up for that, and I recommend things like that. But the best exercises are going to be specific to the person, right? So different exercises, different mindfulness techniques, different meditation techniques, different breathing techniques, different Qigong practices are different. They're not all the same. So, and having said that, my general prescription for people who have long COVID is to do less. The way I start, and even from the case studies, there's people that I was treating who were very active and exercising and busy professionally. And I said, do as little as possible. So generally my recommendation is to do less. Could those exercises help with people? Yes. But in my view, it has to be person specific. So that's my non-answer to your question, but that's an honest non-answer. Okay.
I just wanted to let you know there's some questions in the chart about the chat about specific particular cases of long COVID, and I just wanted to ensure that you have enough time to finish your presentation, and I'll make sure that everybody gets your information. So if there's direct outreach, that you can connect with folks.
Great, and they can, as I mentioned before, if you want specifics of points and herbs and treatment principles, you can go to the article, which is on my clinic website, Jade MT Wellness. On the header, on the first page, on the home page, there's a link to the article there. So I'd be happy to talk about that stuff, but I'd read that because that's like, you can geek out on that for a while. There's all kinds of stuff on that. Okay, so what can we do? Diet and lifestyle, very, very important. In my opinion, in people feeling better with long COVID, 50% of the efficacy is acupuncture and herbs, and 50% is diet and lifestyle, truly. Diet and lifestyle, in some cases it's even more. 50% is a conservative number. So what we eat and how we live affects everything. Very important. So what I'm going to talk about is my understanding of long COVID, my understanding of Chinese nutrition, Eastern nutrition. Eastern nutrition is not necessarily the same as Western nutrition. So some of these ideas are going to look different just because it's a different thing. So with food, animal protein, very, very important. Very, very important because animal protein generates a lot of energy in the body. And remember the first symptom we talked about was fatigue? Animal protein is dense protein, but not all animal protein is the same, right? So we want animal protein because COVID and long COVID are inflammatory conditions. We want animal protein that's not warming. So the best animal protein that's not warming, and also part of with the heat rises and the wind rises. So you want heavy rooting food that's not warming. The two best proteins is pork and eggs. Pork is neutral in temperature, so it's not warming. Eggs are slightly warming or neutral. Beef is slightly warming. But we do not, and we're going to get to this in the next slide, we do not want chicken and turkey. But chicken and turkey are good for us. No, not if we have heat, it's not good for us. Chicken is warming and turkey is hot. But because they're birds, so Chinese medicine has a metaphorical medicine, birds fly through the air. Flying through the air means it's wind. So chicken and turkey are not only warming, they contribute directly to neurological symptoms. And I could talk about a lot of case studies where people were eating a lot of chicken and turkey and had neurological symptoms, both with long COVID and Lyme disease, and they stopped eating chicken and turkey and their symptoms resolved really quickly. So we don't want to do birds that fly through the air. We want to do root vegetables because roots are rooting, feet on the ground. We want to take the heat and the wind and we want to root it into the ground. Soups and stews because they're easy to digest. So in Chinese medicine, the saying is, it's not that we are what we eat, is we are what we digest. So when people are not feeling well, when people are sick, when people are tired, it's called pre-digested food, which means it's cooked, it's mushy. Soups and stews in general, and of course, the best food is local, seasonal, natural, organic food. So eating local stuff, very important. Lifestyle, also very important. People need to sleep. This is not a typo. That's not a typo, the 9 to 12 hours. That is essential. In Chinese medicine, going these old books that we have called the Neijing, which is published, written over about 5,000 years ago. It says if people are healthy, they should sleep about 8 hours. You should work 8 hours, you should rest and be with your family for 8 hours, and you should sleep for 8 hours. That's if you're healthy. If you're tired and overstimulated, it needs to be more. Minimum, real minimum would be 9 to 10 hours. Even if you're not sleeping, just laying down with your eyes closed is healing. If you really want to heal quickly, so people come in and they say, I really want to heal quickly. I feel terrible. I need to get back to my life. 12 hours in bed. Truly. And I've had people do it. And not surprisingly, it works well. And we need to live a yin life. So what is yin? Yin is rest, it's relaxation, it's doing less, it's taking it easy. And sometimes we equate that with depression. That's not depression, that's relaxation. Right? So we're so hot, we're so overstimulated that rest and relaxation can feel foreign. But we need to embody that. We need to get used to resting again. So what to avoid? The biggest one, I know this is not always appreciated, but I say it all the time. And so I'll keep saying it. The hottest food we ingest regularly is coffee. By far. It's so important. I have a whole chapter in my book on coffee and how overstimulating it is. So the most important thing with inflammatory conditions, long COVID, Lyme disease, pain of all kind, is to really cut out coffee. So decaf doesn't matter because it's not the caffeine. So decaf coffee is still hot. So we also want to cut out onions and garlic. Why? Because they're spicy and hot. Ginger is hot, cayenne is hot, turmeric is hot. People are using turmeric as an anti-inflammatory. Turmeric is used in Chinese medicine for 2,500 years. It's called yellow root, jianghuang. And yellow root, turmeric, is used for pain that comes from cold. And how that happens is pain can come into the body, lodge in the body, and that blocks the flow of blood and energy, and that blockage creates. The turmeric is for a particular kind of inflammation. It's not from inflammation from heat. It's inflammation from cold. So turmeric's not good, nutmeg's not good, I mentioned chicken and turkey. Dairy and gluten. Dairy and gluten are not good, not because from a Chinese nutrition view, they're inflammatory. They're not. What they are, though, is they create dampness. Dampness is phlegm, and the phlegm can trap the heat. So like with discharge, right? Discharge is dampness, it's phlegm. So in addition to not eating things that are hot, we also don't want to eat things that create dampness. So we want to avoid gluten and dairy. We want to avoid tropical fruit because most things that grow in the tropics are either hot or damp. Why is that? Because the tropics are hot and damp, the fruit there is hot and damp. And we definitely want to avoid white sugar because white sugar creates both heat and. And with lifestyle, we want to limit stress and stimulation. We want to limit, or even better, eliminate exercise and exertion. Important. If in a hot condition, if we have an inflammatory condition, we can't exercise our way out of inflammation. We have to rest our way out of inflammation. We have to sleep our way out of inflammation. And we really want to eliminate or at least limit screen time because screen time is overstimulating. So any questions about that? I know there's good news and bad news, right? We take things we like, things we don't like. But this is my training and this is certainly my clinical experience. And I talk about this in detail in the article going through. And so this with long COVID in particular, this is not just theory to me, this is clinical efficacy. So any questions about that? Yes. Sure, comments are good.
So in the early days of long COVID, as you probably know, Western doctors, particularly the version of long COVID where people had fatigue.
Yeah.
Doctors were telling people to force themselves to do exercise.
Yeah.
That's the way out, and that turned out to be later on. It was figured out, on the Western side. This was completely wrong.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that to criticize anyone, but the kind of fatigue that helps with exercise is the fatigue that Chinese medicine calls stagnation. Like if the energy is stuck and you exercise, you can get more energy. But this is not fatigue stuck. This is fatigue from inflammation. So inflammation is overstimulation. So exercise does not make you less overstimulated.
One other comment I'll mention just from my own personal experience.
No.
Speaking to this comment you made about individuality, how we're all different, different person.
Yeah.
I got to the point eventually where I could walk several miles, and I used to love walking. It's what I did all the time. But put me on a bike for a minute, and I was in bed for.
Yeah. Right. And so just to comment on that, if you do something and it feels bad or you're in bed for the week, that's not the right thing, just to state the obvious, right? So yeah, so walking could have been okay. Maybe the biking was overstimulating more. Yeah. So that's, again, the idea of treating the person rather than a diagnosis. Yes.
We've got a couple different threads going online with regard to nutrition.
Okay.
There was a question about, do you have recommendations for a vegan or vegetarian diet? The beef, porks, and even eggs, that it would certainly help to cool the planet. that idea. There was another question about fish and grains. And then a particular subthread on turmeric and wondering, isn't that supposed to be helpful for inflammation? And just wondering.
Yeah. Okay. So diet is important. Vegetarian diet. Well, if you can eat, if vegetarian diet involves eggs, that would be good. Sometimes it doesn't. If there's no animal products, then you really, really want to emphasize heavy foods. You want to eat a lot of root vegetables. Beets in particular, potatoes, carrots, turnips. So you want to root things down. And if you're not doing animal products, you really need to be diligent with not doing warming, windy foods. So you have to be really, really diligent. But I emphasize heavy foods. What I mean by heavy is kind of nutrient dense food that grows below the ground. So emphasize that. Right, with turmeric is a warming anti-inflammatory. So if the pain and inflammation is coming from heat, turmeric's not the herb. And that's just a different view. And there was a third vein.
There was another question. Is yogurt inflammatory?
No, well, no, yogurt is not inflammatory. If we are translating the Western term inflammation into the Chinese term heat, then the answer is no. Because dairy is cooling. So that's the good part about it. But dairy, too much dairy, and what I mean by too much dairy often is like bigger than a handful. Too much dairy.
Yes. Guy's trying to find his carrot seeds. Have you seen
What's
any
that?
carrot seeds? I'll swing a little bit.
Ask your question in the chat. Do you want to do that, Kate?
So dairy does not create inflammation, but it does create damp, and the damp can trap. So secondarily, it can create the conditions where it makes it harder to get rid of.
Yeah.
Kate, you can mute from there.
It says don't plant into the ground until a little later.
Maybe we can get some right.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, was there another question?
Are you okay if we then include the slide deck? Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think that caught up with all the questions. There is a just general question about how do you test for the placebo effect with interventions? I imagine that research is challenging in terms of how to.
Well, that's a great question. How do we, my answer clinically is I don't, because I'm a clinician. So I just treat. So the issue, there's different ways to structure studies from a Western scientific view, but there's a lot of issues with placebo studies, and I know this is a bigger topic, but I have real ethical issues if we're having a blind placebo study and half the people get the remedy and half the people don't. As a clinician, that's a moral issue for me. But in terms of other testing, Western medicine conventional medicine emphasizes control, right? We want to standardize. This is not controlled medicine. This is customized medicine. So what we could do, though, is we could have 100 people get conventional medicine and 100 Chinese medicine, and we can compare that. But in terms of standardizing the medicine, in my view, that's not Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine is individualized and customized. Yes?
So I'm also an acupuncturist, and some of the studies that I've seen have done things like they will have a point prescription. So everybody is going to get these 5 points in one group, and that's sort of our control. And then another group of people will get customized treatments, and they'll compare them, and typically both improve. Now, the standardized treatment points, they are still doing something. So, you know, but it is a little bit difficult to design studies that truly control the placebo.
Yeah, and Chinese medicine is not based, but there's lots of research that indicates that just people going into a healing supportive setting helps them feel better. So we should facilitate that rather than try to control out the variables, because that's just not Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine is a variable, embedded medicine. We treat different people different ways.
And we are placing all of your information in the chat, and we're going to make the recording available via our website, just so folks know, because we're past it's 10 after. So I wanted to make sure you're able to.
Great. And I'll finish up. I'm very happy to continue the conversation. I'd like to continue the conversation after the talk, not only here, but in general. That stop.
You could use the keyboard.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do I hit this one?
Yeah, just the arrow. I just need to talk the screen.
Oh, because it went too long. Okay, great. That's the last one. Okay, so what's the opportunity of long COVID? Change. That's the opportunity. The Wenbing, the academics tradition, makes it clear that in their view, and I'm very much a Wenbing School of Heat practitioner, so that's the main tradition that I practice within, is that epidemics, pandemics happen because large groups of us are out of balance. So long COVID, I believe, and COVID also is potentially a wake-up call. It's potentially a way to get our attention, because that's what any symptom, individual symptom, collective symptom, symptoms are the messenger. So then the question is, what is the message? The message is we're hot, the country is hot, and the planet is hot. And so if we don't address those conditions, then we haven't listened to the message. And to translate that into Chinese medicine, we need to reduce inflammation internally. We need to reduce overstimulation internally. And that's what makes us less susceptible to the effects of COVID and long COVID, but also to epidemics in general. So even though the statistics are really staggering and the level of suffering is staggering, I am very optimistic that this can be a wake-up call, that we can individually and collectively really try to get the message of what's going on. Okay, that's it. Any other questions?
So one follow-up question. So as far as the 32,000 people with, is there an age range? Is there any statistics on age?
There is some statistics on age. Yes, it's more in older people. They are estimates. I believe there's statistics in the paper you can look at. Yeah, it is more towards older folks in general, but there are lots of young kids. I'm treating people, young kids, high school students, college students who have long COVID. So it's not just older people, but I think it skews more towards older.
But it's not the young kids, it's not right?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't treated I've treated young kids with Lyme. I haven't treated young kids with long COVID. So I'm not sure about that. Okay, any other questions?
We should wrap, and then if people have questions, they can stay around if that's okay. So to honor people's time. But thank you so much, Brendan.
Okay.
Brendan, this is Sydney. Can you hear me? Sydney Boyd?
Sorry. You could chat.
I just wanted to thank him. And
okay.
and I just my text won't transmit for some reason. I just would like to email Brendan at a later time if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
Great. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Okay.
Bye.